21-22 academic year. My name is Karen Stansberry Beard. I'm delighted to serve as not only the chair of the committee in conjunction with Kristen Mills, who's serving this year as our co-chair, but also your host for the lecture series. This year, we are starting off with diversity in methodology presentation, and Penny Pasque has been so gracious in volunteering to serve not only last year and unfortunately wasn't able to fulfill that at the time, but agreed to step up to be first this year. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Penny Pasque, and she's going to be speaking this afternoon on What More Can I Do? As the title, an exploration of critical advocacy research and decision points for social justice researchers. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, sit back, and Penny's going to begin her presentation. There will be opportunity for you to engage with her. Also, if there's something you need to, or a question you have, either put it in the chat or just jot it down, because we'll come back towards the audience, the larger audience at the end of the presentation, so that we can engage you in some conversation. So thank you again for being here. Penny, if you're ready, take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for taking time to be here, whether you're doing email or going for a walk or just staring at the screen. I'm really thankful that you're taking the time to chat today. It's always a little bit different when you present to colleagues in the department. And so I just appreciate this opportunity and relationship. So thank you. So I did create a little PowerPoint with some slides here so I can see the chat, I can see some of you, but first wanted to start by saying, and I did put closed caption going on here too. I wanted to thank Karen and Kristen and the entire diversity committee for Ed Studies for your important work, because this is just such a historical present time for us to be really engaging in this type of research that makes such a difference. So thank you to the committee for the invitation, because the department and college really should be, and we are thinking about what we can do to make change. So I also wanted to start with a land acknowledgement and mention that I present to you today, which I think many of you are also in the same place, in Central Ohio, which I recognize as the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. And there's a long and violent history of research on Indigenous communities. And so I think while we pick up this topic, it's also important to think about IRB and the requirement about do no harm, and how that might not necessarily cover what your definitions of do no harm are, or the people that you're working with, what do no harm means to that community. And so paying attention to those really make a difference. So what more can I do? What more can you, we, I, myself included, do? An exploration of critical advocacy research, what that means even, and decision points for socially just researchers. So we're going to talk this all through today. You may or may not have seen the abstract for today, so I just wanted to point out a little bit about this. So it really is research that has the potential to make change toward more racially equitable and just society. Critical advocacy research itself moves beyond just mere and important documentation of oppression and hegemonic power in systems of oppression, but it actually requires a commitment of the researcher to support and advocate for voices not always clearly heard, and to make change in some form. That could be many different forms, and we'll talk about some of your ideas about what that is as we go forward. So where we're going today, and I'll have little opportunities for us to either chat, or with a bigger group, I'm watching the numbers go up, which is really nice. So maybe we'll just pop in the chat at different times to have you all engage, and then leave plenty of time at the end to chat. But we'll talk about what critical advocacy approaches really are, and then decision-making for for you as a researcher in terms of collection analysis, and then really implications for policy or law or schools or whatever your work is. Additional concepts too that we'll talk about, and many, a whole conversation at the end. This work is really based on a proposal that's almost finished with SAGE and a book that I'm working on with them. So what is critical advocacy inquiry? It really is a paradigm that is multifaceted, that really crosses and connects ontologies, epistemologies, methodologies, axiologies, praxeologies. Critical scholars actually have said, axiology is supposed to also mean practice, but scholars don't always do that. So critical scholars actually came and said, let's pull out praxeology as something separate so that we can highlight it more readily and actually talk about practice, because it's not happening with our current conversation on axiologies always. So in any case, that's what praxeology really means and kind of how it came about. So I really appreciate Shields. If you have one of those big handbooks of qualitative research by Denson and Lincoln, her work is in there, and she talks about critical advocacy and really scholars, us, serving as public intellectuals, but also really we have the potential to make change with critical advocacy approaches. And it really begins with questions and of inequity and disparities, and they hold promise for this equitable future that is non-existent yet, but we hopefully will work toward, right? So her work really focuses on those problem statements, questions, paying attention to what's really going on in front of you. With some scholars previously, and for today, talking about critical advocacy research, it really is an ever-expanding paradigm of understanding. It generates knowledge in service of equity and social justice, which we mentioned. But if you know the traditional paradigms that we probably got taught about in graduate school, critical advocacy really sits at the nexus between critical paradigm and the participatory paradigm, and the overlap of that. I'm working with Rosanna Carducci with an encyclopedia piece to really kind of flesh that out using Mertens and Denson and Lincoln and different people's perspectives on what critical is now in terms of critical advocacy work. But unfortunately, this remains very muted, and at least in higher ed community conversations, in publications, etc. And so why is that? Why aren't we talking about critical advocacy approaches very often? I turn to the work of my colleague, Leslie Gonzalez, who really has uncovered the ways in which faculty, we tend to stick with how we were trained. We may adjust that slightly as faculty, but we were trained a certain way. And so this, she's linked to, and we're working on a piece about epistemic injustice, the ways in which you really are forced at times, not always, but at times, to really pick up the epistemological and research perspectives of your chair, your committee, and get socialized in a certain way that then could reduce just the creativity, the complexities, the diversity that we really need in some of the research. So I also think it's important to know, well, I'm going to take you on a path of what critical advocacy research really is. I want to be clear that the dominant paradigm, empirically proven by Bess&D, really is that in at least higher ed work, what gets published is positivist work, right? Know the field, know the dominant before you really try to seek to overturn. And I think it's important so that you really know what's going on, how people are trained, and then where your work really needs to flip that. So I just don't want to tread lightly over the power and privilege kind of pieces that happen within the academy. But that said, your research as scholars that disrupt dominant paradigms is needed. It is. So how do we do this in a rigorous, way that really can get out there, can get published, can get connected with communities. So critical advocacy research, really, we talked about it, centers on social justice and equity, but I also wanted to point out that you can pick up a diversity topic, for example, I put it in quotes. So you can take a look at white supremacy or race or ability and do that from a positivist perspective, a post-positivist perspective, post-structural, constructivism, interpretivism, whatever your perspective is, you can, across this, false continuum of paradigmatic perspectives, you really can take up topics of equity and diversity. And that doesn't mean a critical topic doesn't mean you're picking up a critical approach to your entire research design. So that distinction, I think, is important. So what is that critical advocacy design? It really is that researchers are taking up topics and questions, working with community members, data analysis or interpretation, dissemination processes, everything from beginning to end and all around is with this critical advocacy approach in mind. So give me tangible examples, Penny. How does this show up in research, right? So I'm going to start with John Cresswell, just because he's one of the people that most grad students know and have heard about the 5 parts of a research study, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So this is what we know. So I'm going to take this and actually talk about, I think, a lot of you probably understand that this really is iterative. A number of people have written about how these 5 parts are not necessarily lockstep as you would publish in a journal or present in a research presentation at AERA. Instead, it's very iterative. And so as I have taught qualitative research for 12-ish years or more, what I did was actually try to draw the entire research process, knowing that this is very didactic and not encompassing everything, but students were appreciative of, can you show me? I need to know, where does that fit? I don't quite get it. So I think if you want to know what students are learning in my class, this is a good example. So what I do each week is to say, let me point to existing using data analysis and possibly a theoretical coding process or collection, or if we're at the methodology section and we're talking about methodologies, I will point to where we are in this overarching scheme of research. So yes, we talk about trustworthiness versus goodness, catalytic validity, what the differences are across the paradigms. This, again, very false continuum of research paradigms, but it gives students a picture to say, now we're talking about ontology. Now we're talking about pragmatism as a paradigm. Now we're talking about a problem area and research questions, etc. And so I think a discussion for another day is, can your paradigms really change, right? No, there's a textbook that I use where people have said, oh, I started out as a pragmatist, but then I really moved to constructivist. And Foucault and others have talked about how that doesn't really happen. You're reducing it to methods. So you might have used methods that were pragmatist, but you always have been, as a person, a constructivist. So that's probably, I feel like I'm talking to my colleagues, so you probably know all this, right? So I just want to kind of fly through this a little bit here. But again, these are all decision points as you go through your research study, and you get to make decisions about this. And so I want to give you a couple of tangible examples so you can think about, with your own scholarship, whether you take up critical advocacy research or not, how to think about disrupting, interrupting, overturning, reimagining your conceptualization of research and what that means in your research area and what would fly, right? So I'm going to start by flipping this. So again, faculty colleagues, I can start with like right away, flipping this upside down. So here's a tangible example with Cynthia Saavedra and Ellen Neimark. And Borderland Mahistahee feminism is one that starts with the community. It doesn't start with this didactic kind of place that I just gave you and introduced. It flips it. It starts with the community and creating questions with your community participants. It's a tool for collection and analysis, and also methodology and epistemology. It uproots dualistic thinking. It's actually the lines between these boxes here. It's a bridge between these boxes. The lines themselves are the very exciting, in-depth process, not the box itself in Borderland Mahistahee feminism. And it's also very embodied. It is a part of who someone and communities are together. So that's a good example of how it's not so didactic, right? As maybe what we always think about with research. Some other good tangible examples for you. Our group worked with Detroit's Hope Village, and actually in their IRB and the research grants, paid participants who were community members, who were then researchers, trained community members to be researchers in the Detroit community, paid them for their time and energy, and they worked with focus groups in the community on work around college access networks. So there's different ways you can think about working with community members, undocumented students. This is another piece that is really a good one. I talk about trust in a book that I have done. So here, I'm going to just move down the sheet as we go to talk about designs, right? So methodologies, you can probably name a ton of methodologies right now as you think about what are my decisions as a researcher. So let's pick up grounded theory. And grounded theory in this very, let's see the top here, little box, let's kind of pull that out and focus in on that box and this very false continuum, right, of paradigmatic perspectives. So if we take that and we think of grounded theory, you as a scholar, if you're a post-positivist, you might use Strauss and Corbin and their methods for collection and analysis. As a grad student at University of Michigan, this is what I learned was all of qualitative research, was this one box right here. And the methods for collection analysis, open coding, ICO coding, you know, all that select coding from Strauss and Corbin. But come to find out, that's not all of qualitative research. So if you're constructivist, you might use Kathy Sharma's and her constructivist grounded theory. She connects that with social justice quite a bit and feminism. And then Kathy actually studied with Strauss and Corbin and was like, I'm not a post-positivist. I think I can do grounded theory with a constructivist perspective. So let me actually create that. Let me build on that. So she has a Sage book that will talk you through what does that mean to be a constructivist and still do grounded theory. So then along comes Adele Clark, who her work is often picked up in nursing and health fields. And she says, I am a postmodern grounded theorist. I really believe in mapping and really visual mapping, and this is going to help with analysis. So her methods follow from there. And to do congruent research, this is the work that you would follow. And then your findings come out of there, your implications, your significance, right? So I'll just pick up one more case study, right? If you're doing post-positivist work, you could use Yin or arguably Stake. People I've seen put Stake in post-positivist versus constructivist. So I think I'm not, you know, I can't name it for someone else, but I have my perspective. And then critical postmodern, and then implications, right? You follow the congruent research design, but critical advocacy research doesn't come with congruent methods. It doesn't have that, right? So what are some methods that you would have to create? And I would introduce the concept of bricolage here, which may be familiar to you. From a critical perspective, it was developed as a way to pull in different methods and approaches to further critical work. So in Red Dirt Indigenous Research group, I've worked with this group for a long time now, and Corey Still, Brianna Ferris, Monty Begay, and myself. So we have an Indigenous research team called Red Dirt, and we really utilized Sean Wilson's very iterative Indigenous research methods approach, which is very circular. So much like we started talking about earlier, this very circular approach to Indigenous methodology. But for us, that wasn't enough. We knew that we wanted a critical perspective in there too. So we really had to connect critical and Indigenous in order to think about and disrupt the institutional powers around Native American students and the racist things that were happening on campus out of the mouth of the president at the time. Let me give the example that's tangible. He had come out and said, oh, Sooners aren't racist, using the mascot. Well, if you know the history of Sooners, Sooners are people who in the land run ran too soon to grab their land in this colonization process and took land from Native peoples. Whereas if you're not a Sooner, if you're a boomer, then you waited your turn, I guess, according to the US government in the land run. So here the president is spewing language that is very indicative of racist colonization language. And so we wanted to juxtapose the institutional perspective and student perspective. So we have information and research and speeches from different presidents who are at the university, historical context. We did field notes and went to different events. We also did interviews with Native students, and it was the Native student interviewer and interviewee. I did not do the interviews, and talked about and interrogated the importance of that. We also were very cognizant of our own identities. And so me as a white faculty advisor for the students, how do we approach that? And so thinking through our own experiences and what we were seeing in terms of bases of oppression that in different ways that oppression was happening on campus, and then what we were seeing, what we were feeling, how we were experiencing it ourselves. So this was a tool that was helpful. And so for analysis, we really drew from a bit from Bartlett and Vavras with their approach, which is often for international work and comparative work. But case study, when you think of case study, don't you think almost right away about it's bounded. It's got to be a bounded system. And so in Leslie Bartlett's work, she's an anthropologist, and in our own work here, the historical was as present as the contemporary. It was important to do both and to pay attention to both. So in our methods of case study, we were actually really pushing on traditional notions of what case study is. And so I want to actually hear from you in the chat. I will ask you, if you'd like, to think through data collection, and really just think about data collection. In a second, we'll talk about analysis. So you heard a little bit about our collection processes, but what are your favorite ways to collect data? I put data in quotes because it's very reductive, at least to me, but what are the ways you like to collect data in your research? Stories, photos, asking people to draw. What are your favorite ways to really collect data? Just pop it in the chat. We'll take a look. Interviews. Thank you. Loving the interviews. And us too, we used interviews, videos and photo voice. Yes. So here we're gonna ask you to create videos or photos that represent your experience. The University of Georgia, actually, the grad the director or dean of grad studies hired grad students to do a research project on the experience of grad students in their program. And so they actually used photo elicitation and then photo voice, and then had all these photos to show the grad college about the experience that students really were feeling on campus. And it was telling. Creating collages, asking people to create a collage, and then that can be the basis for your conversation, your interview as you go. That could be what people bring and then talk through. Thanks, Lord. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. And so here are some other ideas with some citations. I know you're all faculty and grad students, so you love the citations. Walking interviews, postmodern focus groups, CRIT walking, drawings. I had somebody use tarot cards and ask people to explain tarot cards with an adult learning project. There's critical co-constructed autoethnographic journals. I mean, there's so many. And so do you have it? What data collection process is going to help you to really get at the question that you're after? What is going to really drive it? It doesn't have to be your typical standard interview. You know, you can mix it up. So here's some citations for you. But also for collection, I wanted to mention kind of thinking through the process, right? A little bit more deeply. So with sociologists, Al Young and Mark Chesler, they had a faculty diversity research project, and the interviewer and the interviewee were always of different races. So here's the interview all about teaching and teaching about race in the humanities, natural science, social science. You have the interview, and then you get to a point where you say, at the end of the interview, if I had been of your same racial identity, if I had been a Black person, an Asian person, a Native person, and you know, whoever you're interviewing, would this interview have been the same? Or would it have been different? Let me tell you, that last question elicited an entire another interview process and was so rich, right? People like, oh, Penny, this interview would have been way different. Oh my gosh, what a question. Yes, I would have told you different things. Here's why. And that one question at the end of the interview was really about a midpoint, where then it was a conversation really that opened it up and was different. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Miriam, for the comments about paying attention to memoirs and your research too. I appreciate it. I know here it was a longitudinal study where it was a collectively kept diary over obviously a decade, and women elected leaders and women identified humans were writing in this collectively kept diary as a form of collection. So now let's turn to analysis. I'm watching time and I want to leave us lots of questions. So I just want to ask, and you can pop it in the chat or just think about it yourself, but what are the ways that you analyze your data in a way that takes up a culturally responsive approach or critical advocacy approach, whatever your approach is, that does not abandon your original design or intention, right? Are you always going back to, I say I'm doing critical advocacy research, but then I always go back to Strauss and Corbin and their open coding, active coding, select coding, right? So why? Why? Is it just because you're trained how to do analysis in that way? What is the congruent approach for you to really interrogate and get after what you're interested in? So here's a couple ideas for you. I think situational analysis, that postmodern approach with the maps, and Dale Clark really goes after power arenas, positional maps to help you to interrogate some of these things about critical advocacy work. And her work, while it's really postmodern frame and comes up that way, Michelle Salazar Perez and Gail Canella have taken up her work in a critical perspective, working with Katrina and schools. And at Katrina, Michelle would pick up parents and drive them to the school board meeting, and then they'd have conversations, and this was all a part of the research that she was doing, but it was from a critical frame and more of a critical advocacy approach. And so she took that and pulled it over to her critical design here. So I think the main takeaway is for you to think about the different types of coding analysis methods where you are not always just going to what you know. What are the ways that are really congruent with your own design, and to really argue for and line up your work with critical advocacy work. So Cynthia Lightfoot has a temporal narrative analysis where it really is over time what's going on for people, and it might help think things through. There's also theoretical coding. If you're picking up tribal crit or lat crit, you can take a look at that theoretical approach in the data, if you will, emotion coding, heuristic coding. There's so much out there for people, but I think people with analysis, what I'm finding, I think we need to work on with students is they get to the analysis part and it's just all their data and a screen that blinks in front of them, and they're not quite sure what to do. So how to help students to and ourselves really think about the choices that we can make. So here's analysis with the National Study on Women in Higher Ed and Student Affairs, and the messy map that you would find with Adele Clark's kind of work. Another approach I want to mention to you, and I just really was excited about their work and their book, Colette and Eric. So I invited them to write a section in this encyclopedia on Routledge Encyclopedia on qualitative research methods. And so they're writing about their approach, which is introduced in this book, Critical Co-Constructed Autoethnography. And it really is about fighting systems of oppression in solidarity and difference. It is just a wonderful book if you want to take a look at that. And so they're going to write and get that out a bit more. So some others you might recognize, Laura Fenton Davis, another group that I just really appreciate the work that's been done in a series of a couple manuscripts, and who are going to be writing for this Routledge Encyclopedia that I'm working on with some people, is about intersectional methodology. And it is also they've taken it to the next step of, here's this Black women methodology, intersectionality methodology. And now hopefully kind of people will be using this more often now that they're giving tools as a methodology. What does this mean in terms of methods, in terms of epistemology, all that. So take a look at some of this work too for you. I just have one of their articles up there, but there's more, two that I know of. Another person, Amira Ozias, just got a job as a faculty member at Arizona. And so she and I take up critical discourse analysis with critical geography in, just unexpected ways. And I think that with critical geography in particular, it's a theory, but it's connected to methodological research approaches instead of simply reducing it to method, which is what we talked about at the beginning. We get often trained up in a way that reduces everything to method. And so what are the ways to really think this through? So in wrapping up here and starting to move to the method, the dissemination, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rich Milner's work. He's a grad of this program and talks about positionality and the ways it can be very dangerous in research processes. And so he talks about very seen dangers, like the faculty diversity interview protocol. Hey, we see that people are different in terms of race. We're going to talk about it, ask about it. That's very seen. He also talks about unseen dangers that are there and unforeseen dangers, which can be extremely problematic. So please take a look at his work. But in addition to, trustworthiness is something to pay attention to. It might sound different in different paradigmatic approaches, might be about validity, or might be trustworthiness or goodness or crystallization. I mean, there's different terms that you can think about what is congruent for me as a scholar, but it's for critical advocacy scholars, bricolage is really important to intentionally pull things and make it very clear for your, and transparent for your reader and for yourself, because it's not always clear, right? So as you're going through it, it's very muddy. And so how you can make that you know, explicit for yourself and for other people. So I have some funding questions here. Julian Cheek is great and really thinks about when you're getting funding, what are the ways that, you know, I'm conducting research that matters and you can generate funding, right? How you don't have to like sell out in terms of your research. You can do both in really kind of questions researchers on how to do this as you're, you know, within the academy where funding matters, right? So Qualab is situated in ORIC. So ORIC is a place there for you, resources to help you get funding and not feel like as a qualitative researcher, you have to sell out, for example, with your work. You can still publish on what you want to do. So I want to move you know, to a discussion because I think that'll be super fun. So I'll just mention about dissemination, going beyond publishing in journals. I do think it's important to publish in journals so that you can further the work and get it out there to your colleagues, but also, in addition, there's multi-tiered work you could be doing with dissemination, where if you're working with co-conspirators or co-participants, or where your community partner is the first author on a newsletter for the community, and then you're first author on a journal article, or you are an expert witness for a court case, op-eds, getting your work out there. All of these things I think are familiar to you, but how to really think about that in your research design. Your decisions, again, matter. Your health also matters. So Carmen did a Qualab video for us on working with traumatized populations that's up on our website in case you want to take a look at it. And, you know, recently, so Patty Lather was talking about this at the AMI conference and, you know, got me thinking about and appreciating Bettina Love's work in a new, different way, right, than before. And she writes about regretting not situating her work as social justice, right? Being trained up, like we were talking about before, being trained up in a certain way and having this notion of objectivity and what had to happen with research. But now, as she's progressed as a scholar, one of the dissemination kind of things that we're talking about, dissemination really as a broad term, means for her empowering the girls to challenge misogyny and heterosexist male fantasies. So instead of just telling about it, oh, I really wish I would have done that. So arguably, maybe her work really did do this with the girls that she was working with. Maybe it didn't. I mean, she's the one who would know, but I think it's an important example about how dissemination could mean more than the written page. It really could be about working with communities, changing policy, changing the way people operate in the world, that is a form of dissemination in a way, and your research mattering. So paying attention to your engagement with community and people makes a difference. So how are you thinking that through as a scholar and not just leaving it to the page, but really working on change with these girls, for example? So all of your points matter, didactic or not, critical advocacy or not, but all of your decisions matter, and it is messy, but exciting too. I get excited about research as you think through your options as a researcher, whatever your paradigmatic approach really is. So we have Qualab lunches happening and all that, and the Qualab grad student board just kind of pub accepted. I'm worried they're going to think it's that easy in the future, but it's exciting work. So, you know you can come for consultation there anytime, an hour consultation, just to think through some of your ideas, or send your students, as long as it's not coursework, we'll chat with you about that. And then we have a couple talks from a woman from John Glenn, a faculty member from there. We have Transana now in the lab. So in addition to in vivo, we have Transana. And so Brian's going to be talking about how to use that. And then I did a lot with Ed Studies with Qual Lab last year. So this year it's a little bit more T&L heavy. And so we're going to be talking with some teaching and learning faculty about critical qualitative perspectives, and then our new faculty who joined us last year. So I'm going to just exit and stop sharing and open it up for conversation here, because I think this is the fun part that Karen had said, please leave, 15-20 minutes to chat with your colleagues about what this work might mean for you. So I'm gonna, hand it to Karen.
Well, thank you very much, Penny, for the presentation. Yes, I am going to ask those of you who joined us today, if you have any questions or comments with regard to Penny's presentation, this is the opportunity for you. I will admittedly share with you that I'm going to have to turn it over to Ryan to conclude, just because I have another obligation. But Ryan and I have discussed, Penny and I have shared, and so this is your opportunity now to engage in the presentation as well. Any questions for Penny and or for me? I don't see hands up.
Or even talking about your own research ideas or where you are, questions that you're wrestling with. I think that would also fit with Karen's question.
I wonder too, Penny, if we are singing to the choir, as you said. These are all, look, not all, but many very well steeped qualitative researchers. So I am interested. I really appreciated you bringing forward the notion of the tribal community that you're working with. I want to talk to you more about that as well. I had not heard of the critical theory that they espouse. So I'm very interested in that as well as we continue to move forward.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And that group actually worked with making change from that research study in higher ed institutions where they worked, but also in their community, their tribal communities, and working with recruitment to institutions and how to change the institutions, but also recruitment, what people should expect on college campuses and how to navigate that. So it's a part of what our, opening up that dissemination, what that means really look like there.
Wonderful. That's awesome. I think Teddy raised his hand and I thought I saw one more. Let me go back in my screen. Go ahead, Teddy.
Hey, Teddy.
Hey, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm just blown away by all the resources. I feel like I'm screenshotting as much as I could about things to add to my reading list. So I have a sort of a two-part question as a faculty member here. That's not as related to all the great things you're talking about, but more about the Qual Labs. So I want to know how I can support our graduate students to think in terms of critical methodology. And I think oftentimes, like you mentioned Patty Later, who was here, and just the fact that she is sort of like talking in retrospect about how she did situate her work in ways that could have been even more impactful, like that blows my mind, right? Because it's not like she wasn't already extremely influential in the work that she did. But I feel like, and maybe this is just where I am in TNL, many of our doctoral students still come with this positive, post-positivist perspective. And they often, they express to us or to me, like, hey, I wish I'd known this maybe 2 years ago or a year ago before I really started to dive into what I want to do. And, now that the Qual Lab is up and running and you are doing amazing things, all I ever say is, hey, go check out the website and go and get involved with things. But I'm not sure what our vision is, maybe as a college, of how to embed these into their methodological preparation, how we can sort of have more just general conversations about how this works within our work. or even what resources that are available that might not be taken advantage of, that we as faculty and staff can sort of push a little heavier? So this is a multi-part question.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. Thank you. And it was actually Patty Lather's presentation at AMI where she was talking about Bettina Love's work, and Bettina Love was saying, I wish I had done this. And so definitely check out Bettina Love's work. I mean, she's got now work on abolitionist teaching and things that are pretty awesome. So I'm with you, right? What are the conversations we need to have as a college? And so in talking with Natasha Sleznik and others in the OREC office, I'm really clear about, here's the curriculum that's in teaching and learning and in ed studies. And I'm involved with the curriculum, involved in ed studies with my faculty hat on. But as Qual Lab, we don't necessarily touch the curriculum, right? But I think your question expands the curriculum, right? It goes beyond that. I can post classes, right? I do that in the Qual Lab. But in terms of conversations about the college or where to introduce this, I think that's really important. And so I'll give you an example that I've given at a presentation a while back. Actually, for Patty, I was an early career scholar, and I had to be the discussant for her and Betty St. Pierre, right? So what I was trying to do was make sense of part of their arguments. And so I turned to Lady Gaga, who is a musician and who is very like postmodern with her work, advocacy, with her singing, right? But she's also somebody who knows and is classically trained. She can hang with Tony Bennett. She knows her hip hop, her salsa merengue. She's been trained up as a thespian, right? She's got the basics down and then chooses to push on the limits of, you can see her music, feel her music, you can smell it if she's wearing one of those like outfits made of like bacon, she's just a postmodern kind of person. And that's not necessarily me as a scholar, but that's her. I value her. And so I think the point here is, how do we as faculty make sure they understand to some extent the dominant paradigms, the dead white guys that are there, right? Because I think that gives even more tools to then be able to say, I'm not doing that. And this is why, so I can speak to you at AERA if you're going to come after me and try to cream me, because I don't know who, Cresswell is or whoever, but I've got that down and I can speak to it because I'm on top of the game with where I am in an intentional critical framework. And so I just use that as an example to say, how do we do that for our students and for the college, and think through how to prepare grad students in a way where they're not just doing the dominant paradigm as you're talking about, and they're thinking about more critical work. We do have in the Qual Lab, 2 critical presentations in the same, semester, very different. And I hope, maybe Teddy, we'd love if you came. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if everybody would come and think and use that as opportunities, or think about what are the Qual Lab conversations that we might need to have next semester to really deepen that question that you're asking, because I can't, I shouldn't be doing it alone, should do it in conversation with you and with the other faculty. So, and students. So yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Is that like kind of, and I'm going to be like emailing you and be like,
I'm excited. I'm excited, and it's not just me. I think there's a lot of amazing faculty, and I'm speaking on behalf of my Department of Teaching and Learning. I think that having more deeper conversations, especially about how we can just sort of build more bandwidth for great conversations to happen. I think that's really the secret. Like, just hearing you talk about it ignites all these ideas that I have, that I've been wanting to do for the last few years here at OSU. All right, so let's just keep talking. Right?
Awesome. And we should also keep our marketing department up on what we're doing, because I think there's just this magic that's happening at Ohio State that I know some of it is getting around the country, but how do we make sure people know about all the work that's happening. Thank you. Elvira, you had a...
Hi, Penny. Yes, hi. I'm Elvira or Elvira Abrica. I'm a faculty at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Thanks for allowing me into this space. I learned about your talk on Twitter, so I'm really excited that it serendipitously is happening when I had a grant application rejected based on some of the reasons that you talked about in your talk. The commentary around my proposal was that there wasn't an alignment between these critical ideas and the approach that I was using. I'm kind of new to grounded theory and grounded methodologies. So the feedback was basically like, you need to get more specific about how you're going to execute this work. Essentially, I'm trying to explore the racialized organizational dimensions of community colleges in rural Nebraska. And I'm wanting to understand how, we study community colleges in a very race neutral way. The critique about them tends to be around how like bureaucratically inefficient they are. And I argue that bureaucratic structure is like racialized, borrowing from sociologist Victor Ray and other folks' work. So anyway, my proposal was seeking to study these dimensions of the organization on how there's a bi-directional influence between the community that's changing and the organizational structure of the community college. So I proposed, per Ray's framework, I proposed to look at cultural schemas, resources, and individual agency, but the reviewer said it is not clear how these dimensions and the reciprocal influence of the CC and the communities in this area will be examined. They want more specifics around like how I'm going to look at place, community, organizations. And, I said, well, I guess I'll just do like 10 interviews with different people in the community. And, I just sort of like winged it. And they said, no bueno. They said, this is just not getting at what you're trying to study. And so I don't know how to study what I want to study, which is like, how are these things racialized? How are I want to make a case that there is this racialized process happening, and there's this bi-directional influence between this organizational structure that's been predominantly white and now the changing Latinx population in these rural areas. But I just don't know how to do what I want to do. So any thoughts or encouragement would be most welcomed.
Yes. Well, you're not alone with the grant proposal rejections. I'm with you. A lot of faculty don't talk about, oh, my article got rejected or my grant got rejected. That is common, right? But we often don't talk about that. So you're in good company, I'm sure, in this group. And also, I appreciate what you're going after. And it sounds like the methods they were saying weren't necessarily congruent. So kind of what we were talking about here.
Yes.
Yeah, analysis. And so if it's about actually using LatCrit and the theoretical coding from LatCrit, or I heard you talk about space and place. So critical geography, Ryan Gildersleeve, Aaron Kuntz, Sarah Pink, like there's different people who have done some great work in geography and thinking about what that means in terms of space and place and dominant structures that then end up being oppressive. And I think you're right on, not a lot of that is in community college work. So how to think through your methods so that it matches, and picking the coding or the analysis so that clearly you've got some great questions, and this, how does your design match that? So I also want to, community college, I always think of Ebony Zamani Gallagher and her work with community colleges and really interrogating notions of race and racism in community college systems. So she's got a whole center at University of Illinois. So if you haven't checked, had a chance to check, maybe you know her already and all the work she's done. So.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And yeah, I appreciate all the references. I think the challenge is just, when you look at examples of like Gildersleeve's work or others, their studies are so specific to their questions and their places and their ideas, right? So I guess as someone who's learning still how to design research, I guess these funding agencies, you know, you talked about like the need to disseminate, like people want these specifics, and I just I'm torn between like they want to know how many people are you going to talk to, and it makes sense, they're giving you money to go out into the field, so they want to know how many interviews and with whom and how, and I just don't know how to make those decisions. And I guess the best I can really do at this point is to just rely on other examples from some of the resources you've shared, and just kind of try to figure out what a number would look like here, because they want those logistical details that, I don't know, I guess my plan was just to go and be in the space and like feel it out, but that doesn't seem sufficient for the level of funding I'm asking for. So yeah, it's still a struggle to get those very specific design details ironed out, and with a rationale for doing so, when so much of the constructivist approach is, you know, kind of doing the walking interview and doing things that, you know, I don't know who's going to willing to do that with me. I just don't know. So anyway, I just appreciate all the references and just kind of opening this space for this discussion, because I'm right in the middle of it.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And you're right, like here's this emergent design, or, you know, that you're really going after. And so what does the funder need to feel like they're giving you money, that they know what's happening, right? So kind of torn in that sense. And so how to think through your design to satisfy, you know, all the pieces that they need while not giving up this, you know, natural process that you might have while you are on campus. And so I think maybe thinking through, and this is actually exactly the SAGE book, right? Decision making and how to actually make these decisions that align with the approach. And so what are the design elements that you can give, that you know you will do, that really kind of resonate as you have learned more, you know, hopefully here today, but as you keep reading and figuring out how do you answer that question, who is it that you need to talk with, the citation for walking interviews, you know, I mean, how to really be clear with the funders so they know what you're going to do. And then if you go beyond in this more emergent way, you usually have that space and that room to go beyond in, you know, after something's funded, and to come back with them about even more. So, I mean, to keep going.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Ryan, how are we doing?
Yeah, we are just about at that 1 o'clock time. So we can wrap up. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Pasque, for this wonderful start to the year with the diversity lecture series. This year we'll be engaging graduate student research in addition to faculty, and are working to be inclusive in the populations and perspectives present in our community. So we encourage everyone to stay engaged and stay on the lookout for our save the dates on the series speakers moving forward. There's a couple ways you can do that. If you are here at OSU, we will be sending out emails and posting events all over the place. If you are not at OSU, you can follow at the link that I just put in the chat, or go to u.osu.edu/edstudies. And we have a web page there for the diversity lecture series, where we will post both the events coming up as we plan them, as well as posting recordings of the events after they have happened. So if you want to revisit this particular event or recommend it to someone else, feel free to direct them to that page. It should be up there here shortly. And with that, on behalf of the committee under Dr. Beard's leadership, we want to thank you again for coming and kicking off what promises to be an exciting academic year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.